The shuttle came down through the haze like a wounded bird, its landing gear shrieking against the parched stone of Oris. Dust rose in curling waves around the hull, swallowing the horizon in a red-gold blur. Ryan Caldwell leaned forward in the pilot's chair, squinting through the scratched viewport at the ghost of a city sprawled below. Morirana, once a mining colony, now just bones scattered across the desert. He rubbed a hand across his stubbled jaw, half amused, half disgusted. 100 credits for all this. Guess I'm a real estate genius, he muttered, the words dry as the wind outside. The shuttle's engines wound down with a reluctant sigh, leaving silence so complete he could hear the blood in his ears. For the first time in years, no orders barked in his coms, no distant artillery, no hum of orbital transports, only the sound of dust scraping metal. That should have been peace, yet it felt like standing in the aftermath of a funeral. He pulled on his jacket, the old military issue with faded unit insignia, and stepped into the heat. The air hit him like a furnace blast. The settlement stretched out in pale ruin-collapsed domes, half-buried corridors, the ribs of old hab modules jutting from dunes. His boots crunched over grit as he walked, scanning the empty horizon. Home sweet nowhere, he said aloud, because silence demanded an audience. He tried to imagine what this place had been. Families, lights, a hum of purpose. Now only ghosts. He kicked at a rusted sign half buried in the sand, and it clanged hollowly, echoing through emptiness. He should have felt relief, no crowds, no bureaucracy, no memories, but the quiet carried too much weight. Still, he told himself, this was what he wanted. Isolation. A place to disappear. Then something broke the spell. The faintest twist of movement. A wisp of smoke rising from one of the smaller structures near the ridge. He froze. Smoke meant fire, and fire meant life. His hand went automatically to the blaster at his hip. Caution flared where boredom had been. Every instinct drilled from 15 years in the Colonial Defense Forces woke up at once. He moved silently across the sand, keeping to shadow where the dome still cast slivers of shade, until he reached the building. It was different from the rest-intact walls, debris cleared from the entrance. Someone lived here. He smelled it now, something cooking, faintly sweet, spiced with minerals not from any human world. He took a breath, thumbed the safety off, and called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Silence. Then the shuffle of movement from inside, light but deliberate. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said. "Just bought this place, if the deed's worth anything." A pause. Then a woman's voice, soft but steady, touched with an accent that made every word sound like part of a melody. "You bought Morirana?" "That's right," he answered cautiously. "Paid for it fair and square. 100 credits." A laugh drifted out, low and bitter. How generous of the Galactic Registry. They sell what they abandoned. The door slid open, and Ryan forgot how to breathe. She stood framed by the dusty light tall, slender, her skin the pale blue of evening ice. Silver hair spilled over her shoulders, glinting like glass threads, and her violet eyes studied him with the calm of someone too tired to fear. Behind her, a small child peered out, half hidden by her legs, eyes wide and curious. Ryan lowered his weapon slowly. "Didn't know anyone was still here." "We are what remains," the woman said. "I am Kavira. This is my daughter Iris. We are the last of Morirana." The girl tilted her head. "Mama, is he a human?" "He is," Kavira said, never taking her gaze off Ryan. "And he says he owns this place now." Ryan cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the absurdity. "Let's not use the word own. I just bought some empty ruins." Kavira's expression softened, though a hint of sadness lingered. "Nothing here is empty," she said. He almost smiled, despite himself. I can see that. Before he could say more, a low moan rippled across the horizon. The air thickened, the light dimming as if the sun itself shuddered. Kavira's eyes darted skyward. "Storm," she said sharply. "A bad one. You can't stay out there." He turned to look. The horizon was a wall of swirling gold, advancing fast, devouring sky and desert alike. "My shuttle." "Forget it," she snapped, grabbing his arm. "The leading edge will skin you alive." For a heartbeat he hesitated. Then the first gust hit, stinging like needles. He followed her inside as the door slammed shut behind them. The sound outside rose into a shriek of sand and wind, 1,000 tiny impacts rattling the structure. Inside, dim light flickered across walls patched with metal plates and fabric. The child clung to her mother's side, eyes wide but unafraid. Kavira moved with calm efficiency, sealing vents, checking seams. Ryan helped where he could, hands steady out of habit. When at last they paused, breathing hard, she met his gaze across the small room. The wind howled outside, but here, inside this alien stranger's home, it was warm. He gave a crooked half-smile. "Well, looks like I picked one hell of a neighborhood." Kavira's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You humans," she murmured, turning back to the controls. "Always arriving in the middle of storms." The storm raged like a living thing, clawing at the dome until the walls groaned and the ceiling quivered under the constant assault. Inside the cramped shelter, the air smelled of dust, metal, and the faint sweetness of boiling broth. Ryan crouched near the entry hatch, sealing the final scene with his emergency compound, the polymer spreading in a thin line of gray that hardened instantly under the heat. Kavira worked beside him, silent and efficient, her movements precise. Every now and then their hands brushed, and he caught the glimmer of her silver hair in the lantern light. "That should hold," he said, sitting back on his heels. "Military grade. Survived worse than this." She regarded his work with a faint tilt of her head. "You talk as though you've fought storms before. Sand, plasma fire, bureaucrats," he said dryly. "One's as bad as the other." A tiny giggle bubbled from the corner of the room where Iris sat cross-legged, watching them. The sound was so small, so unguarded, that it startled him. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd heard a child laugh. Kavira followed his glance, and her features softened slightly. "She thinks you're funny," she said. "That's new," Ryan murmured, leaning back against the wall. The storm's roar pressed against the walls like a physical weight, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like running from the noise. It was something alive, something shared. Kavira ladled a bowl of steaming stew and handed it to him without a word. The metal spoon clinked softly against the rim. He sniffed it, cautiously rich, savory, with a hint of iron. "What's in it?" "Tubers, water root." "Dried Riss's meat," she said, sitting across from him. "Don't ask what Riss's is." "Smart woman," he said, taking a bite. The flavor surprised him, earthy and warm, a reminder of meals eaten in better times. For a moment, he forgot he was on a dead world. "You cook better than half the army rations I survived on." Kavira smiled faintly, though her eyes were distant. "My husband taught me." "Before the mines took him." The words dropped between them like a stone. Ryan set down his bowl slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "The stabilization rigs failed." He thought he could fix them. Her voice didn't tremble, but he could feel the loss underneath, sharp and old. "We stayed. Everyone else left. You stayed alone?" "We had hope," she said simply. Hope that maybe Morano wasn't finished. Her gaze lifted to meet his, and for an instant, he saw something flicker behind her composure, a loneliness that matched his own. Outside, the wind screamed louder, rattling the window seals. Iris whimpered at the sound, pressing her small hands to her ears. Without thinking, Ryan crossed the room and crouched beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "It's all right, little one. This place looks sturdy. Bet it's seen worse storms than this." She peeked up at him through a curtain of pale hair. "You promise?" "I promise." He gave her a crooked grin. "I've got the best sealant in the galaxy. Nothing's getting through that." The girl's lips curved in a hesitant smile, and Kavira exhaled quietly behind him. "She believes you," she said. "That's a rare thing." "Maybe she's just not old enough to know better," Ryan replied. "Or maybe she knows exactly what she sees." Kavira turned away, busying herself with the cooking pot, but he caught the ghost of a smile. The walls shuddered again, a thunderous vibration that sent a fine mist of sand from the ceiling. Ryan jumped up. "That's close," he muttered. "Where's the weak point?" "By the south panel," she said, already moving. Together they shoved crates and tools against the bulging wall. Ryan stripped off his jacket and pressed the reinforced plating against the seam, holding it with his shoulder. "Grab the clamps," he called. Kavira's fingers were sure and quick, fastening the improvised patch in place. The wind battered against the barrier, but it held. After a long minute, the roar dulled to a steady hum. Ryan stayed braced there, breathing hard. Kavira reached up and brushed dust from his arm. "You're good at this," she said softly. "What, patching holes or surviving bad decisions?" "Both." He laughed under his breath. "Comes with the uniform." She studied him for a long moment, eyes catching the glow from the lantern, then turned away to check on Iris. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor. Back to the patched panel, exhaustion creeping over him. Kavira sat opposite him again, hands folded loosely in her lap. The storm outside moaned, a living heartbeat that matched the flicker of light between them. For the first time since he'd arrived on this forsaken planet, Ryan didn't feel like a ghost. Kavira broke the silence. "You came here to be alone," she said quietly, not as a question but a truth. "I did? And now?" He glanced at the child asleep against her mother's side, then back to Kavira's steady violet gaze. "Now I'm not sure I remember why." She held his gaze a moment longer, then turned as a gust of wind struck the dome, the sound almost like a sigh. "The storm will pass by morning," she said. "You can rest here." "Thanks," he murmured, stretching out on the narrow mat she offered. As he lay staring at the ceiling, he heard her humming softly, a tune in a language he didn't know. The noise outside faded, the rhythm of her voice wrapping around the small space like a fragile promise. Ryan closed his eyes. Somewhere between the storm's dying breath and the lull of that alien melody, the ghosts that had followed him from the wars finally grew quiet. Ryan woke to a silence so complete it felt sacred. The walls no longer trembled, the air no longer roared. The only sound was the soft hiss of settling sand outside. Pale light leaked through a slit in the patched window, turning the dust in the air to gold. For a moment he lay still, disoriented, wondering if the storm had ever really happened. Then he caught the faint aroma of something warm and spiced, and the soft murmur of voices. He sat up. Kavira was already awake, her silver hair loosely tied, moving gracefully between a small cooking unit and a table hobbled together from old mining crates. Iris sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing on a slate with a fragment of chalk. The sight stopped him for a heartbeat, the quiet domesticity of it, so alien and yet so familiar it ached. "Morning," he said, his voice rough. Kavira turned, offering a small smile that reached her eyes. "You slept deeply." "Military habit," he said, rubbing at the grit in his hair. "When you finally get the chance, you take it." She handed him a steaming cup. The scent was sharp and earthy. "Turk tea," she said. "It clears the head." He took a cautious sip. It was bitter with a sweet aftertaste that lingered like honey. "Not bad," he said. "Beats field rations." "Everything beats field rations," she replied, returning to her work. Iris looked up from her drawing. "Is your home like ours?" "My home?" he repeated, caught off guard. "I don't really have one anymore. Everyone has one," she said with the fierce certainty of children. "You just forgot where it is." Kavira's hand paused for a fraction of a second before resuming its slow rhythm. Ryan looked down into his tea. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe I did." After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The storm had remade the world. The dunes had shifted, the horizon redrawn. Buildings that had been half buried now stood exposed while others were lost beneath fresh drifts. The air shimmered with heat, but the sky was a clear, impossible blue. It should have felt like a fresh start, but Ryan's stomach sank as soon as he saw the twisted shape in the sand ahead. His shuttle lay on its side, half buried, one stabilizer wing torn clean off. The viewport was a spiderweb of cracks, sand spilling through the seams like spilled time. "Shit," he muttered, jogging toward it. Kavira followed, her expression grim. He circled the wreck, running his hand along the hull. The engines were choked with dust, the fuel cells ruptured. One look told him the truth. "She's done," he said softly. "Can you fix it?" Kavira asked. "Not unless you've got a spare atmospheric converter lying around." He tried to make it sound like a joke, but his throat felt tight. "Even if I patch the hull, the nav core's fried. I'm stranded." She studied him for a moment, her eyes unreadable. "I am sorry," she said. "For your loss." He almost laughed. "I keep collecting those." Then he took a long breath, forced the frustration down. "Well, at least I got a bargain. 100 credits for a permanent address." Iris tugged at his sleeve, her expression earnest. "Does that mean you'll stay with us?" The question caught him off guard. He looked from her bright face to Kavira's guarded one. "For now," he said finally. "Until I figure something out." The child beamed, revealing teeth slightly sharper than human. "Good. You can tell me stories about your world." He smiled despite himself. "Sure, I've got a few." They spent the next hour salvaging what they could from the shuttle ration packs: medical gear, a portable beacon, a toolkit. The long-range communicator was damaged, but not beyond hope. Ryan set it carefully aside. "If I can get this working, maybe someone will hear." Kavira shaded her eyes with one hand, watching him. "And if no one comes? Then we make do," he said simply. "Humans are good at that." She gave a quiet, almost wistful laugh. "So are Lyrians," she said softly, the word catching the light like something half forgotten. Ryan glanced up from the wreckage, the sun painting hard edges across his face. "Lyrians," he repeated. "That what your people are called?" Kavira nodded, kneeling beside him to help unbolt a scorched panel. "Once we had many colonies. Now fewer. We adapt or we vanish." The calm in her tone wasn't resignation. It was discipline, the same kind he'd heard in soldiers who'd lived through too much loss to waste breath on anger. Together they worked until the sun slid toward the horizon, the sky bleeding into violet and gold. The storm had left a strange peace behind, the air clean, the ground gleaming with tiny flecks of crystalline sand. As Ryan stowed the last of the salvaged supplies, something caught his eye, a dull gleam in the distance. "You see that?" he asked, pointing toward the heart of the settlement. A soft green-blue light pulsed faintly from the largest dome, just visible between the collapsed structures. Kavira followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. "That should not be possible," she said. "The power station died cycles ago. I was there when the last reactor went cold." Ryan squinted into the dusk. Maybe the storm shifted something, reconnected a line, cleared a relay. She shook her head slowly. No, the core was dismantled before the evacuation. Well, someone forgot to tell it, he said. Because it's glowing now. They exchanged a long look. Curiosity tugged at both of them, stronger than fear. By the time they reached the central dome, twilight had settled fully, and the light from within pulsed brighter, washing the sand in alternating waves of turquoise and white. The entrance was half buried, but Kavira found a manual override beneath the dust, her fingers deft despite years of neglect. The door hissed open, releasing a breath of air that smelled faintly of ozone and age. Inside was darkness, until Ryan's flashlight swept across the interior. Rows of dormant consoles lined the walls, their surfaces etched with alien glyphs. Metallic conduits coiled along the ceiling like veins, and in the center stood a transparent column filled with swirling energy that looked alive. This wasn't mining tech, Ryan said quietly. No, Kavira replied, stepping closer. This is older, experimental. Taran said the company found something buried beneath Morarana, a structure they couldn't explain. They built the dome to study it. She trailed off, staring at the column. He believed it was precursor in origin. Ryan frowned. Ancient civilization, right? The ones who supposedly seeded half the galaxy? Stories, she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Until now. He brushed dust from a nearby console. The surface flickered to life beneath his hand, a thin ribbon of light forming alien symbols across the display. Kavira leaned in, translating under her breath. System diagnostic. Searching for compatible life signatures. The column's glow brightened suddenly, a low hum filling the air. Ryan stiffened. What did it just say? It's scanning, Kavira whispered. A beam of soft light swept across them, lingering first on him, then on her. For an instant, the air vibrated with a deep harmonic tone that seemed to pass through their bones. On the screen, symbols flared. Kavira's eyes widened. It identified us. Human, Lyrian, compatible. Compatible for what? Integration protocol, she read. Activation authorized. The hum deepened, becoming a slow, rhythmic pulse that echoed like a heartbeat. Ryan instinctively reached for his weapon, but Kavira caught his arm. Wait, she said. It's not hostile. Her voice was calm, almost reverent. The glow intensified, bathing them in shifting colors. For a moment, Ryan thought he saw shapes moving within the column geometric patterns, forming and dissolving in perfect rhythm, like a mind thinking in light. He swallowed hard. I think we just woke it up. Kavira nodded slowly, eyes reflecting the glow. Or maybe it woke us. The energy surged, and the consoles around them came alive, projecting a three-dimensional map into the air, a lattice of tunnels spiraling beneath the settlement, converging on a single massive chamber deep below. The image hung there, pulsing softly, a heartbeat beneath the earth. That's right under us, Ryan said. Whatever this is, it's still running. Kavira turned toward him, her voice low and sure. This is why the company left. They didn't abandon Morarana because it was empty. They left because it wasn't. Ryan met her gaze, and the air between them felt charged, heavy with the same energy pulsing through the dome. So what now? He asked. We find out what's down there, she said. But not tonight. The glow washed over her face, catching the line of her cheek, the tremor in her breath. Ryan realized he hadn't seen anything so alive in years. He smiled faintly. You're something else, you know that? Kavira looked at him, uncertain but not unkind. You humans, she said softly, always flirting with death and calling it curiosity. He chuckled. Guilty. As they turned to leave, The column pulsed once more, a final beat that echoed through the chamber like a promise or a warning. Outside, the stars had come out, glinting cold and sharp over the quiet dunes. Kavira glanced back at the dome's faint glow. "It's awake now," she murmured. "And it knows we're here." Ryan didn't sleep that night. The faint pulse of the dome lingered in his thoughts long after they'd sealed the door to Kavira's dwelling. He lay on his makeshift bed listening to the quiet no wind, no hum of machinery, just the slow rhythm of two other breaths in the dark. Kavira and Iris slept curled together in the alcove across the room, mother and daughter forming a single silhouette in the dim light. It should have been peaceful. Instead, unease crawled through him like static. When dawn came, pale and cold, he stepped outside to check the beacon he'd set up on the roof. It blinked its silent distress code into an indifferent sky. He knew no one would answer. The cores didn't come for deserters or dead worlds. Behind him, Kavira's voice drifted from the doorway. "You're thinking about the signal." "Force of habit," he said. "I spent years sending calls no one answered." She joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The early light turned her skin to soft silver. "Perhaps this planet means to answer you in its own way." He looked at her, wondering if she was joking, but her expression was unreadable. "The light in the dome?" "Yes, it wants something. Or it's broken and trying to finish a process from centuries ago." "Maybe," she said. "But it found us." Ryan started to reply, but a movement caught his eye. Small footprints trailed away from the doorway, leading toward the dunes fresh, pressed into the sand at dawn. His gut tightened. "Where's Iris?" Kavira froze, then turned, scanning the dwelling. The alcove was empty. The blanket lay rumpled where the child had slept. Her eyes widened. "No, she never goes far." But Ryan was already moving, following the trail. The prince led straight toward the central dome, then veered off toward a smaller structure, half buried in drifted sand. He drew his blaster, instincts coiling tight. "Stay behind me." Kavira didn't argue, but her face had gone pale. "That's the old mining access," she whispered. "It was sealed years ago." The door hung crooked in its frame, a dark gap yawning beyond. Inside, the footprints turned to scuff marks, descending a narrow stairwell. A faint blue glow pulsed below. "Iris!" Kavira called, her voice echoing. No answer. Ryan flicked on his wrist light and led the way down. The air grew cooler as they descended, heavy with dust and the faint tang of ozone. The rough walls gave way to something smooth, metallic, veined with light like frozen lightning. "These aren't mining tunnels," he murmured. "No," Kavira breathed. "This is what they built the dome over." The stairway ended in a vast circular chamber. The floor shimmered with embedded patterns glyphs that glowed faintly beneath a haze of blue-green light. In the center, seated cross-legged on the floor, was Iris. She looked small, impossibly small, surrounded by the glow. Ryan's breath caught. "Iris," Kavira said, running forward. The child looked up, smiling dreamily. "Mama called me. It wanted to show me something." "It?" Ryan asked, scanning the room. The air seemed alive with quiet vibration, a hum that resonated in his chest. Kavira knelt beside her daughter. "What did it show you, little one?" Iris pointed toward the far wall, where a massive crystalline pillar rose from the floor to the ceiling. Energy spiraled inside it like liquid light. "It showed me you and him and me," she said softly, pointing to Ryan. "It said we belong here." Ryan crouched beside them, his pulse hammering. "How do you know what it said?" "It talks in pictures," Iris whispered. "In my head. It says we can fix everything." Kavira's gaze flicked toward the pillar. "Fix what?" "The planet," Iris said, eyes wide. "The people who left. It says we can make it alive again." Before Ryan could respond, the light from the pillar flared. A tremor rolled through the chamber. The glyphs on the floor brightened, forming 3 distinct circles, one beneath each of them. Kavira grabbed Iris's hand. Ryan. He moved closer instinctively, but the moment their circles overlapped, the humming deepened to a harmonic thrum that made the walls vibrate. A voice filled the air, not words, but pure resonance, so deep it bypassed language. Ryan felt it in his chest, in his bones. The pillar's light surged upward, coalescing into a holographic figure, a tall, elegant form of shifting facets, its face smooth and alien. Designation confirmed, it intoned. Triadic species synthesis achieved. Kavira's fingers tightened around Iris's. What are you? Custodian unit of Nexus Point Morana, the figure said. Awaiting directive. Directive? Ryan managed. What do you want from us? Continuation, it said. Completion of the harmony sequence. The energy around them pulsed in time with their heartbeats. Human, Lyrian, hybrid connection, viable. Terraforming core ready. Kavira's breath hitched. It thinks we're keys, Ryan finished. It's been waiting for us. The system isn't supposed to be aware, Kavira said, shaking her head. It was dormant for centuries. Then something changed, Ryan said quietly. Maybe the storm. Maybe us. The custodian's form flickered, turning toward Iris. Central conduit detected. Neural resonance optimal. No, Kavira said instantly, pulling her daughter close. You're not touching her. The voice was patient, almost kind. Conduit required for full activation. Process will restore planetary equilibrium and sustainable biosphere. Harm minimal. Ryan raised his blaster. You'll forgive me if I don't take the word of a talking light show. The custodian's gaze, or what passed for one, shifted to him. The choice is mutual. You must consent. All 3. The room dimmed, the hum softening to a heartbeat rhythm. Iris looked up at him, calm in a way that scared him more than the light. Papa, she said softly, her first time calling him that. It's not bad. It feels warm. Like it's alive. He stared at her, then at Kavira, whose eyes shimmered with tears. He could hear the soldier in his head, warning him to retreat, regroup, survive, but for the first time in years, survival didn't feel like enough. If we do this, he said slowly, what happens? Life, the custodian replied. And consequence. Kavira met his gaze, and for a long moment the world narrowed to just the 3 of them, standing in the glow of something ancient and waiting. Then Ryan holstered his weapon. All right, he said. Let's finish what we started. The pillar blazed, and the chamber filled with light so bright it erased everything but the sound of their hearts, beating in unison. When the light finally faded, Ryan found himself standing at the heart of the dome again, blinking through the afterimage. The air vibrated softly, as though the planet itself had exhaled. Kavira and Iris were beside him, both alive, both glowing faintly, as though the energy had passed through their bodies and left something behind. The custodian hovered before them, its faceted form rippling with slow pulses of color. Sequence complete, it intoned. Nexus Point Morarana restored. Planetary renewal initiated. Ryan turned in a slow circle. Through the transparent panels of the dome, he could see the sands outside shifting, rippling like waves on a vast sea. Dunes collapsed into fertile valleys, cracks filling with water that shimmered in the rising light. It's changing, he whispered. It's alive again. Kavira's hand found his, fingers trembling. It was waiting for harmony, she said softly. That's what it meant, harmony. He echoed, a bond between species. Between worlds, she said, and her voice broke with wonder. The custodian's gaze settled on them. The experiment endures. You have awakened Morarana's core purpose. But be advised, the signal cannot be contained. Signal? Ryan frowned. You mean the energy field? The beacon, it corrected. It broadcasts your success to all nexus points across the galaxy. Others will come. The words chilled him even as light warmed his skin. Others? Those who seek peace, it said, and those who seek power. The dome brightened again, and suddenly, outside, blue-green light speared upward into the heavens, a column that tore through the thin clouds like a blade. Ryan felt the vibration deep in his chest. The sound that followed wasn't thunder, but a resonance so pure it made his vision swim. Kavira clutched Iris closer. What did we just do? You fulfilled the design, said the custodian. This world is now a beacon, a living invitation. And that means we've just painted a target on our backs, Ryan muttered. Your interpretation is correct. The light dimmed, and the custodian's voice softened. But life is risk. The galaxy has forgotten this truth. Kavira's eyes shimmered violet in the glow. Then we will remind them. The custodian inclined its head. Stewardship confirmed. Morarana belongs to you. And with that, it dissolved into motes of light, scattering like dust in the sun. Silence followed. A silence filled not with absence, but with the hum of a world awakening. Ryan exhaled, the weight of it all pressing down. Guess that makes us caretakers of an alien planet, he said. Kavira smiled faintly. It makes us family. Iris looked up at them, her small face luminous with reflected light. I can still hear it, she whispered. The planet's heart. It's happy. 6 months later, Morarana no longer looked like a graveyard. Water flowed through carved channels where sand once drifted. Glass towers rose again, their surfaces alive with light. Refugees from scattered worlds had begun to arrive, drawn by the dream of a place that promised coexistence. Humans and Lyrians, Saurians, and even the scaled Trelli, they worked side by side, rebuilding. At the center of it all stood Ryan and Kavira's new home, overlooking the heart of the city where the nexus pulsed like a quiet sun. Ryan leaned against the railing, watching the crowd below. You ever think we bit off more than we can chew? Kavira slipped her arms around his waist, her voice warm against his shoulder. You humans always think in limits. The nexus doesn't. Neither do I. He chuckled softly, resting his hand over hers. Never thought I'd end up the governor of an alien beacon. Not governor, she corrected gently. Guardian. She tilted her face up to his. There's a difference. Their quiet moment broke when Iris came running, her bare feet whispering across the polished floor. Mama, Papa, the custodian wants to show me something. The child's eyes glowed faintly. Their purple deepened with threads of luminous green. It says the beacon's almost ready. Ryan stiffened. Ready for what? For everyone to hear, Iris said. Kavira's expression darkened. I thought it was already active. Not fully, came the custodian's voice, resonating from the air itself. Its form shimmered into being vast and serene. Final amplification requires all three of you. The triad who brought harmony must now share it. Ryan frowned. And what happens after that? Hope, it said simply. Inside the central chamber, the three stood before the pillar of energy that had once terrified them. Now it pulsed gently, inviting. Iris reached out first, her small hand hovering over the light. Kavira joined, then Ryan. Their combined touch sent a wave of energy spiraling upward, through the dome, through the sky, through space itself. The world outside responded, the towers glowed, the ground shimmered, and the people of Morarana looked up as a blue-green aurora stretched across the heavens. When the light faded, the custodian's voice came one last time. It is done. The message is sent. Ryan swallowed hard. What message? That peace is possible, it said. That two who were enemies became one family. That a forgotten world has chosen to live again. For a long while, they stood in silence, watching the aurora pulse above them like a heartbeat. Kavira leaned into him, whispering, "You found what you were looking for, after all. What's that?" He asked. "Home," she said simply. He smiled, kissed her forehead, and for the first time in his life, the word felt true. But far above, in the cold dark between stars, something stirred. The beacon's light spread outward, touching forgotten systems, derelict outposts, and something else. In the command chamber of a drifting Helios extraction carrier, long abandoned, an alert flared red across the screens. The signal signature of Morarana blinked alive, stronger than ever. The captain's eyes widened. "Helios Prime," he said into the com. "We've found it. The lost nexus has reactivated." Static crackled, then a voice replied, cold and hungry. "Prepare an extraction fleet." Back on Oris, Ryan stood with Kavira and Iris on the balcony, watching the energy pillar gleam against the stars. "What happens now?" Kavira asked quietly. He looked up at the light, their light, and tightened his arm around her shoulders. "Now," he said, "we make sure what we built survives whatever comes next." The beacon pulsed once, brighter than before, casting their faces in gold and blue. And far above, unseen in the night, the first shadows of incoming ships caught the starlight drawn home by the signal of a human, an alien mother, and a child who had woken a world.